So I got a letter said, O'Reilly, we like the No Spin News. We like your news operation. We trust it. Anybody else doing what you do, all right, independent and covering the news in an honest way? And there are, not many. But one of them is BernardGoldberg.com. And, you know, Goldberg and I have known each other for centuries. I mean, and we would go back to the Mongol Empire. But I go to BernardGoldberg.com. And Goldberg puts out commentary, as I do. And I read it, and it's usually measured. Sometimes, you know, it's loopy, but most of the time it isn't. And what caught my eye was that Goldberg, who we usually use on media stuff, is very outraged about this flash mob business. So I wanted to bring him on. He joins us now from North Carolina. Did I introduce you properly?
You did, and thank you for that, but I am outraged. I'm outraged like millions and millions of people out there are outraged. Look, we survived the Great Depression. We survived 2 world wars. We survived 9/11. Thugs who go into stores and take whatever they want, they're not going to bring us down. But society as we know it is beginning to unravel. As you know, Bill, great civilizations in history no longer exist, and our society is beginning to fall apart for all the reasons you just mentioned. When you could walk into a store, steal whatever you want, and there have been thieves since the beginning of history, but when you could steal whatever you want, no police to arrest you, no progressive DA who's interested in prosecuting you, so there's no jury to convict you, no judge to sentence you, no prison to put you in, no freaking nothing, no consequence at all. That's how societies begin to unravel. And if we don't find the courage, or the leaders with courage to put an end to this real soon, this is going to unravel even more, and we won't recognize, as bad as it is now, we won't recognize the America that we live in.
There's no doubt it's going to get worse before it gets better, but it's the fault of the people when you really strip it out. So last November here in New York, we had a gubernatorial election between an unbelievably weak leader, Kathy Hochul, who's the governor, and Lee Zeldin, a conservative Republican who promised reform and to crack down on crime. Hochul won. Hochul beat Zeldin. Okay? So that indicates that as bad as public disorder is in New York City, and it is bad, okay? The voters in New York, they don't care, Bernie, whether it's unraveling before their eyes or not, because the majority voted for Hochul.
You're right, and here's proof that I'm a bad person. They elected these idiots. They have to live with these idiots. Not my problem. But let me say this about the looting issue, because liberals look the other way about looting, about street crime, about the mess on our southern border, which you listed as, I think, the second issue Americans are most interested in. But let's just play pretend for a second. You're not going to see this, by the way, the looting videos on CNN or MSNBC, because, as I say, liberals don't like to talk about this. But let's just pretend that the looting wasn't going on in Chicago, but in South Dakota or North Dakota or Montana or Idaho, and the looters were all wearing big red MAGA hats. Oh, liberals would suddenly be very interested in looting and street crime and people throwing each other on subway tracks in New York City and things like that. They're only interested when it isn't people that they're afraid to point out that are looting. I'm being vague, but you know what I'm talking about.
Well, African Americans,
everybody listening.
Everybody knows that African American young males commit proportionally the majority of crimes in this country. But African American innocent people are far and
Exactly.
away the victims of the crimes.
Exactly.
So the liberals want to help minorities, but they really don't want to help
Look,
minorities.
and as you have correctly said, I saw you saying this, and I nodded my head in agreement. Some progressives say, well, they're poor. You know, they're depraved because they're deprived. They're poor, but most poor people are decent Americans. Most poor people are decent, hardworking Americans, and there's no limit to white liberal guilt. There's no limit to that. And that's why they look the other way when people are looting in Chicago or St. Louis or even California. They look the other way because they know who's doing the looting. Shelby Steele, the black intellectual from California, very bright guy, called it good racial manners. These liberals and progressives are showing their good racial manners. They're saying, no, we're the good ones. We're not racist like, O'Reilly and Goldberg, we're the good ones. And what's going on is precisely what you said. People are being victimized in poor neighborhoods. Poor people don't like this. I would even say most Democrats, most mainstream Democrats don't like what's going on. But until they join people like you and me and the people watching us and say, we've had enough of this. We can't watch America continue to unravel, because there's going to come a time when it unravels and it's too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, it's too late to bring it back together again. But I'll submit to you that in Chicago, the worst for minority victims, because most of the crime in Chicago is centered in the black ghetto neighborhoods south of the city. They elected an even more liberal mayor than Lori Lightfoot. So even though they're being, go ahead.
If you look at the voting, who voted for who in that, yes, black people voted for the black mayor, Brandon Johnson, over a white candidate who was said he was tougher on crime. But it's the higher end, higher income progressives in Chicago and in New York who elected Bragg.
Adams and Bragg.
No,
right.
Bragg. It's these high end liberal, I'll call them elites, who think they're doing black people a favor.
Yeah, I don't know how they can think that when you got little kids,
black progressives.
No, you got little kids
being the black community.
You got little kids being down. You got a 60-year-old black woman on a subway track being beaten with her own cane. So,
right.
Look, these people who you're talking about, these elite Upper West Side Manhattan people, they're despicable people, by the way. They are. And I mean, they're not good intentioned. They're haters. They hate me. They hate you. They hate Trump. They hate anybody in the conservative Republican side. But they know what's happening. They don't care, Bernie. They don't care. So they can cloak it under a nobility or virtue seeking. But everybody knows that a 60-year-old woman being beaten almost to death on a subway track, and the cops let the guy go. Did you know that? Cops let the guy go. They had him, and they let him go.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he had a rap sheet, a violent rap sheet, and they let him go. Now, because the New York Post, which is the only vehicle in New York that covers local news responsibly, because they put it on the front page, now the Internal Affairs looking at the cops. I'm not trying to come down on the cops here. The cops know if they make an arrest of a minority, they got to defend that arrest all day long, and they could get in trouble. So looking the other way is an option. But let's get back to the big picture, disorder. When the voting bloc African Americans continue to vote for the progressive people, whether they're black or white, it doesn't matter. They continue to cast that ballot. They're voting against their own interest. And
yes,
that is the truth. Last word.
It is the truth, and they also have the support of those high-end white people, high-end economic white people on the lakefront of Chicago and the Upper West Side of Manhattan, who are, again, showing what Shelby Steele calls their good racial manners.
Yeah.
You say they're horrible people. They're not looking out for black people. You know what they're doing? They're looking out for themselves.
That's right.
They're saying, look at me. Look how good I am.
Look how good I am.
I
And then
voted for the
in the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all three of those cities are public disorder unlimited. Yet all three of those papers, okay, applaud the progressive movement. And they're not what they used to be, and people don't really listen to them anymore. Right. But it's disgraceful. And I don't know. I mean, all we can do is present the truth, which we do. But if the poor minority community in America doesn't wake up, this is going to continue and nobody's going to stop it. And that's the truth. BernardGoldberg.com. I recommend it. Go in there, cruise around, make fun of Bernie. He's got a little place where you can make fun of him. That's my favorite part of your website, making fun of you. And we appreciate you coming on. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thanks a lot, Bill.